Well then, with that, welcome to community members that have joined us for this session. My name is Ed Shikata, City Manager, and today is Tuesday, May 16th, and this is our 2024 budget listening session. Although actually, since this is being recorded, for the session, you'll simply be listening to us, but we will end with information on how you can provide feedback to the city on where we are in our annual budget process. So before we get started on the particulars, let me just say on behalf of the city organization, thank you to our community members. Palo Alto has really taken significant strides in restoring services that were cut during 2020 and have now been able to address both our immediate needs as well as medium to long-term fiscal sustainability through the community discussions and voter approval of 2022 ballot measures. So on behalf of the city organization, we would like to thank Palo Alto voters and all stakeholders for reinvesting in your community through the passage of measures K and L. So here during our session, we'll have our staff members from the city's Office of Management and Budget present a brief overview, and then as I mentioned earlier, we'll end with opportunities or ways that you can provide either comments back to the city or ask questions so that staff can follow up with you as needed. Your feedback is really valued and important to the City Council decision-making in the upcoming weeks. I would acknowledge that the magnitude of the document that we'll be discussing and that the City Council has physically available can be daunting. There's 2 binders full of information, recognizing that it includes both our operating and our capital budget. That said, the fiscal outlook does reflect cautious optimism and investment in a variety of services, again, both services and capital projects for the city's future. So with that, let me turn it over to Jesse Deschamps and Paul Harper with our Office of Management and Budget to go through the particulars. Thank you. Jesse?
Yep, thank you and good evening. If we could go to the next slide. In tonight's information session, we will review the city's budget process and schedule, the 2-year budget balancing strategy, roles of the Finance Committee and City Council in budget adoption, and we will also provide additional information for the community to join the budget conversation. Next slide. This timeline provides the schedule for key discussions that occur during the budget process in May and June of each fiscal year. As discussed at the introduction, several meetings have already occurred to receive guidance from the City Council and complete a comprehensive review of the budget documents with the Finance Committee, including their tentative amendments. Next week, staff will return to the City Council to provide the status of meetings thus far and receive any last feedback before finalizing amendments at the budget wrap meeting. These final amendments will be included for the City Council adoption in June. Thank you. Here we have summarized some of the key data points in developing the proposed budget. This budget recognizes a pivot point from pandemic recovery to a steadier state or new normal. The operating budget is nearly $975 million citywide and $275 million in the general fund. The capital budget is $324 million in fiscal year 24 and $1.2 billion over the 5-year program. An important factor in this budget is the use of a 2-year balancing strategy. The strategy uses one-time funds to resolve budget shortfalls in fiscal year 24 and 25. However, it's important to note that there is still a projected deficit of $6.2 million in fiscal year 26. This amount may change pending final amendments. And lastly, Measure K and Measure L were passed in the November ballots, and these solidify funding for critical services. Next slide, thank you. This slide reflects a snapshot from our Open Budget web app, which is an interactive tool that is available at the website in the upper right-hand corner. As you can see on the left, the app allows users to select several pre-designed views to see more common searches and static numbers that are available in the budget books. However, you may also use the filters option to define your own search parameters. So overall, the general fund expense budget is $275 million, which is a $28 million or 11% increase over the prior year. Next slide. Key budget strategies are summarized here, and they include, again, the use of one-time funding, and this is to offset shortfalls for 2 years, and also to maintain a 20% budget stabilization reserve, or BSR. By policy, the BSR is set between 15 and 20% of the total annual operating costs. Of note, this is an area with tentative changes from the Finance Committee. This budget also includes adjustments for new labor agreements that extend through 2025, increases to the Capital Improvement Fund targeting pre-pandemic levels by fiscal year 26, and continued investments in the city's long-term retirement liabilities. Next slide. The city is a service-driven organization. Therefore, changes to staffing may have significant impact to service levels experienced by the community. As shown in the graph, staffing levels were reduced during the pandemic as part of cost-saving measures. Citywide staffing is expected to return to pre-pandemic levels beginning in fiscal year 24, though staffing in the general fund is still slightly below. And with that, I will turn it over to Paul Harper to finish the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. As Ed and Jesse mentioned, thank you to the Palo Alto voters because with the passage of Measure K and Measure L, we are able to continue building on investments that we made in fiscal year 2023 in the fiscal year 2024 budget. Measure K, or the business tax funding, will support services in 3 key areas identified by the City Council. This includes public safety, rail grade crossing and safety improvements, and affordable housing and unhoused services. Measure L, or the continuation of the gas equity transfer to the general fund, transfers $7.7 million from the gas utility fund to the general fund, and it supports services like library hours, public safety dispatch services, and community services such as the Junior Museum and Zoo, open space and parks maintenance, and the Twilight Concert Series. In addition to the services supported by the revenue from the new measures, a number of other service investments are recommended as part of the 2024 budget. Just a few of them that are listed here include the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team, or PERT clinicians, and traffic enforcement, code enforcement and building and fire plan review staffing, continued reopening of the city's library branches, fire and life safety inspection staffing, and resources to support the Art Center, animal services, and special events. Along with operating service investments, the city is also making investments in capital projects and infrastructure. The fiscal year 2024 proposed capital budget is recommended at $324 million across all funds, while the 5-year capital improvement plan programs funding of about $1.2 billion. Some of the capital projects in the 5-year plan include investments at the water quality control plant to rehabilitate and modernize the facility, the Newell Road Bridge replacement, completion of the public safety building, planning for rail grade separation and safety improvements, which is partially funded by the Measure K funding, investments in citywide electrification and implementation of the fiber to the premise program, and home key interim housing shelter construction. Next slide, please. The city's utilities generate revenue to fund their operations and capital investments through rates charged to customers. This table shows the current rates in fiscal year 2023 on the left side of the table and recommended rate adjustments in fiscal year 2024 and through the next 5 years. Based on the recommended adjustments, the monthly bill for an average customer in Palo Alto is anticipated to increase by approximately 3% in fiscal year 2024. Next slide. As part of the fiscal year 24 proposed budget, council priorities reserve of $2.25 million was set aside for 2 years, fiscal year 2024 and 2025, in order to allow the council to fund additional services that align with the 2023 council priorities. A list of services that align with these priorities and recommended by city departments are listed in attachment C of the operating transmittal letter and have been referred to as the tier 2 items. As part of the budget hearings on May 5th and May 9th, the Finance Committee reviewed the list of tier 2 items and made tentative recommendations to include some of them as part of the fiscal year 24 budget. Next slide, please. This slide looks a little busy, but it is showing those tentative adjustments that the Finance Committee made as part of their hearings over the last couple weeks. The upper left corner of the slide shows the increased sources of funding that have been recommended in fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, and ongoing. These include the $2.25 million council priority reserve, Measure K funding for housing and homeless services, increased major tax projections and vacancy savings in fiscal year 23, increasing the gas equity transfer to 18% in fiscal year 2025 from the 15.5% proposed in 2024, and using funding that was programmed for operations at the Home Key site to fund the capital construction needs in fiscal year 2024. The table on the right side of the slide shows the various service level increases that the Finance Committee tentatively approved to add to the fiscal year 24 budget. Some items are one-time, so the third column in this table shows the ongoing costs, if any, that are associated with these services. The lower left corner of the slide shows the net of the sources compared to the expenses for fiscal year 24, 25, and ongoing. Based on current projections in fiscal year 24, there is still $1.2 million of funding that could be used to fund additional services. 2025 shows a slight deficit of $300,000. And ongoing, there's a deficit of about $8.8 million, which includes the $6.2 million deficit previously stated in the long-range financial forecast for fiscal year 2026, plus the $2.6 million deficit from these tentative adjustments that were made. Next slide. In addition to the tentative adjustments on the previous slide, there are several items that the Finance Committee placed in what we call the parking lot. These items are to be considered for further review by the City Council, and they will be discussed at the May 22nd meeting next week. Next slide. Thank you for being here tonight to discuss the fiscal year 2024 budget. This slide shows the remaining meetings that are scheduled to discuss the budget. A budget check-in meeting next week on the 22nd with the City Council, the final budget hearing with the Finance Committee on May 30th, and then the budget adoption meeting on June 19th. In addition, you can visit the city's website for more information about the budget and to track the conversations that are ongoing. Thank you very much.
All right, with that, Kylie, unless there was anything else you wanted to add, then we will conclude this session. Appreciate your attention, and please feel free to get in touch with us as you would like to. You can send an email to citymanager@cityofpaloalto.org. That's abbreviated as CITYMGR@cityofpaloalto.org. As well as contact us individually, ed.shikata, and a number of our staff. So with that, thank you for joining us and look forward to perhaps seeing you at City Council meetings.